Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void is a novel by Tim Lebon that takes place as far back in the Star Wars Legends timeline as it gets, taking place in 25,793 BBY in the primary story and 25,803 BBY in the flashbacks, or about 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The novel was released at the tail end of the original EU continuity, coming out in May of 2013, just under a year after Disney purchased Star Wars from George Lucas, with Disney canon beginning just 11 months later, in April 2014, leading up to the Star Wars prequels. So this is a weird middle time, when the Star Wars canon was under some reworking. The novel is a side story in the Dawn of the Jedi time period, enlisting much of the same world building established in the comic book series, such as the Jedi, as well as the ships and technology, with the whole comic consisting of 15 issues across 3 arcs. Dark Horse seemed to have some plans for this era in the Star Wars universe, but all that fell through when Disney took over the franchise and had new plans for the universe, including Dark Horse being taken off the comics so that Disney could use their in-house publisher Marvel Comics to start writing Star Wars stories. The story of Into the Void follows Lannery Brock as she is sent on a mission to track down her brother, who is trying to activate hyperlanes in the Tython system to allow people to leave the system. However, there's a potential it'll blow up or something like that. Dale wants to do this because he always wanted to explore the galaxy beyond Tython. He also turned his back on the Jedi, claiming that it was a weird cult. He ended up faking his death, so Lannery thought he was dead, but the Jedi Council convinced her that she must track down Dale and kill him since he's secretly alive and evil, and created a gang called the Stargazers, who are an evil cult that wants to activate these space rifts along with Dale. Lannery is backed up by Trysana, who's a Twi'lek with like 3 tails, and he is a mind-wiped gangster turned into a sad guy. Anyway, the two travel for the audiobook's painfully long runtime, occasionally getting into some little battles and meeting people before they finally run into Dale and she's forced to take Dale's life and stop the Stargazers. Lannery Brock is a Jedi Ranger, basically just a Jedi Knight, that's an outcast and a loner, who has felt alone in the galaxy since her brother had supposedly passed away. She has really given herself to the Force and the Jedi. This mission, however, is particularly personal for her. We see glimpses of her and Dale's childhood, which I suppose could be cool to learn about the early learnings of the ancient Jedi and stuff like that. And we get more insight on Dale as well, who's the villain of course. Except it starts to feel more like padding than actual story a lot of the times in these flashbacks. I feel like important plot points get drip-fed around this boring plot of these two boring Padawans learning boring shit, and it's weird. Also, they each have their own, class of learning, unlike a standard Jedi, who's typically like an all-around warrior, fighter, healer type of thing. She's like a necromancer or something, who can, possess the body of people. It's really weird. Regardless, I wouldn't really mind seeing Lannery as a lead if she was flanked by more interesting supporting characters. Rather, we just have Trysana, who's a Twi'lek with 3 tentacles, who was a gangster, but was mind-melted by some Jedi master named Dan Powell, who wants him to be an informant for the Jedi. He's kind of whiny, but eventually becomes more or less the voice of reason for the book. Eventually, he gets hit by a stray bullet and gets put into a coma. Finally, let's talk about Dale. No one else really has anything notable enough to do in this 10-hour audiobook to really talk about, but Dale is just your generically edgy, Sasuke Uchiha type character. But he hates the Jedi and criticizes them, but he actually has some good points in the book. And I think the book knows he does, but doesn't really do anything to make him not evil for his ideologies. He's it's a little culty to give up your entire life and start flying around to be a celibate Buddhist monk type of thing who just takes over systems and gets into battles. Dale has some solid points about the Jedi, and it never really goes anywhere. The characters in this book kinda suck, but if I can be fair, they made some fun settings, like Greenwood Station and Lannery's ship are well described, and most of the characters are kinda easy to picture, but sometimes get very over the top. For example, there's a rich human woman named Kara, and in my mind I imagined a rich lady. And the author's like, she's obese and has warts and sits in a floating chair, and her eyes point in different directions, and she has bony fingers, and she looks stern but has a sense of sadness behind her eyes. Like, yo, just say she's a large rich woman in a floating chair. I get it. Adding too many descriptors like that just feels like it's trying too hard. And I stop understanding what the lady actually looks like when I start getting a picture in my mind. And it's like, wait, but don't forget, she also has lazy eyes, and she's warty, and she's fat. And it's like, dude, we get it. We don't need a 6-paragraph essay about this character who appears in a single chapter. It's over the top, and it's a lot of padding in this book to make it way longer than it needs to be. Like, there's probably an abridged version of this book that's like 3 hours long that is infinitely more enjoyable. I don't care what Kara looks like. Just say she's a fat lady in a floating chair. She appears in one chapter. It's fine. I can never really grab a tone for this book either. Lannery is such a non-character that I just really don't care about anything the book has to say about her. And it never really makes me feel anything. It's never exciting. The book isn't funny. There just isn't anything there. The book also wastes a lot of time. The book has 3 major characters. The audiobook is 10 hours long, and I don't think I could write more than a paragraph about each character, as we saw in my descriptions of the characters. The padding on this book is tremendous. The flashbacks to Lannery and Dale's training rarely add much to the book or to endear me to Lannery. She's such a non-character, and her brother Dale is just meh. He's just mad and edgy, and we don't know why, except that he hates the Jedi, which is never really expanded on. Also, Dale's full name is Dalius, but they just keep calling him Dale throughout the whole book. Dale sounds like some guy with a lifted truck sucking on a menthol jewel stick, not a supervillain for a Star Wars book. Typically, Star Wars villain names are on the nose as fuck, but at least they sound evil and stuff. Darth Vader, General Grievous, Darth Sidious. You get the point. These names sound evil, they're sometimes ridiculous, but just give Dale a better name than fucking Dale. I see this guy in a trucker hat, spitting chewing tobacco out into the urinal. I wish I had more to say about this book, but it's a pretty weak spin-off of the Dawn of the Jedi publishing initiative, and it isn't super well-rounded. Doesn't add a ton to the universe either. The goal is to save the Tython system from destruction by Dale, through some confusing shit that can come from him creating a hyperspace rift. It's a goal that fades to the background as the book weaves back and forth between pointless ideas, pointless places, presented from the author, and of course these overly long descriptors of each character. This book isn't even super long as far as it goes, yet nothing really happens. Like, it could have been so much more well-rounded. You could have had a bigger cast. I found it to be a dreadfully boring listen. I will say Tim Lebon really attempts to regain his footing with the climax. Lannery confronting Dale was solid, but the problem is it rings so hollow when everything else around it is so weak, in my opinion. I wish there was more to say about this book. The concept of the ancient Jedi could have been interesting, plus it's so far removed from the rest of the series that none of this really has to impact later things within the story. But I mean, we have the Old Republic, which I haven't delved into that much personally, but it's certainly a fan favorite for a lot of people, and based on the amount of media that was made for Old Republic, I assume there's a pretty solid chance that it's much better than what Dark Horse was trying to do with Dawn of the Jedi. I don't think the Dawn of the Jedi era was ever able to make waves in the way something like Knights of the Old Republic ever did, but it's certainly not for lack of trying, with Dark Horse hoping to make this large epic story. However, Into the Void was really the only tie-in that came in at an awkward transition time for Star Wars. Characters like Dale, Tree, and Lannery are not exactly blowing up the world as new characters in the Star Wars franchise. However, James Mangold, who directed the new Indiana Jones and Logan, has been hired by Lucasfilm to create a film set 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, kind of similar to how this book was, about the Dawn of the Jedi, coincidentally. It'll be interesting to see what aspects pull over into his film, or how much of it actually does, or if they're just like, this is where we want to start the timeline, so let's explore that. And I imagine James Mangold is going to have a lot of creative control. I don't imagine they're going to try to pull too much from the Dark Horse stories, but it'll be interesting to watch regardless. So anyways, that was Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. Next time I'll be going back to my DCEU retrospective series with a look back at Aquaman. To end this video, I just wanted to shout out Alber Urmanov. I don't know the guy, but I found a bunch of these Into the Void concept art fan pieces on his website, and they ended up being a pretty cool visual of the novel, so I just thought I would use some of them here. I'm going to put his website link in the description, and just add a better visual since there's not a lot of Into the Void official art, and none of these characters were featured in other Star Wars media for me to draw from. So, alright, have a nice day, guys.